When we bought our house several years ago, we fell in love with every part of it except the foundation. At 75 years old, we knew these old piers were just about finished holding this old house up. This year, we finally bit the bullet to have them replaced. Any homeowner who's had foundation work done can commiserate with us on the cost and disruption of a project like this. But homes aren't the only structures with foundations. It is both a gravitational necessity and a source of job stability to structural and geotechnical engineers that all construction, great and small, sits upon the ground. And the ways in which we accomplish such a seemingly unexceptional feat are full of fascinating and unexpected details. There's really just one rule for structural and geotechnical engineers designing foundations. When you put something on the ground, it should not move. That seems like a pretty straightforward directive. You can put a lot of stuff on the ground and have it stay there. Unfortunately, buildings and other structures are a little different. Mainly, they are large enough that one part could move relative to the other parts, a phenomenon we call differential movement. When you move one piece of anything relative to the rest of it, you introduce stress. And if the stress is greater than the inherent strength of the thing, that thing will pull itself apart. It happens all the time, all around the world, including right here in my own house. When one of these piers settles or heaves more than the others, all the stuff it supports tries to move too. But door frames, drywall, and ceramic tile work much better and last much longer when the surrounding structure stays put. There are many kinds of foundations used for the various structures in our built environment. But before we dive into how they work, it will be helpful to first talk about what they're up against or actually down against. Of course, buildings are heavy, and one of the most important jobs of a foundation is to evenly distribute that weight into the subsurface as downward pressure. Soil is infinitely strong against vertical loads. It can fail just like any other component of a structural system. When the forces are high enough to shear through soil particles, we call it a bearing failure. The soil directly below the load is forced downward, pushing the rest of the soil to either side, eventually bulging up around the edges. Even if the subsurface doesn't fall on shear, it can still settle. This happens when the particles are compressed more closely together, and it usually takes place over a longer period of time. So job number one of a foundation is to distribute the downward force of a structure over a large enough area to reduce the bearing pressure and avoid shear failures or excessive settlement. Structural loads don't just come from gravity. Wind can exert tremendous and rapidly fluctuating pressure on a large structure, pushing it horizontally and even creating uplift like the wing of an airplane. Earthquakes also create loads on structures, shifting and shaking them with very little warning. Just like the normal weight of a structure, these loads must also be resisted by a foundation to prevent it from lifting or sliding along the ground. That's job number two. Speaking of the ground, it's not the most hospitable place for many building materials. It has bugs like termites that can eat away at wooden members over time, reducing their strength. It also has moisture that can lead to mold and rot. A house was built in the 1940s on top of cedar piers. This is a wood species that is naturally resistant to bugs and fungi, but not completely immune to them, as you can see. So job number three of a foundation is to resist the effects of long-term degradation and decay that come from our tiny biological neighbors. Another problem with the ground is that soil isn't really as static as we think. Freezing isn't usually a problem for me in Central Texas, but many places in the world see temperatures that rise and fall below the freezing point of water tens or hundreds of times per year. We all know water expands when it freezes, and it can do so with prodigious force. When that happens, the subsurface water below a structure, it can behave like a jack to lift it up. Over time, these cycles of freeze and thaw can slowly shift or raise parts of a structure more than others, creating issues. Similarly, some kinds of soil expand when exposed to moisture. Expansive clay soil can create the same type of damage as cycles of freeze and thaw by subtly moving a structure in small amounts with each cycle of wet and dry. So job number 4 of a foundation is to reach a deep enough layer that can't freeze or that doesn't experience major fluctuations in moisture content. To avoid these problems that come with water in the subgrade below a structure, job number 5 isn't necessarily applicable to most buildings, but there are many types of structures like bridges and retaining walls that are regularly subject to flowing water over time, or sometimes over the course of a single flood. The water can create erosion, undermining the structure. Many foundations are specifically designed to combat erosion, either with hard armoring or by simply being installed so deep into the earth that they can't be undermined by quickly flowing water. Job number 6 really applies to all of engineering. Foundations have to be cost-effective. Could the contractor who built my house in the 1940s have driven twice as many piers, each 1 to 3 times the depth? Of course, it can be done, but with some minor maintenance and repairs. This one lasted 75 years, before needing to be replaced with the median length of homeownership somewhere between 5 and 15 years. Few people would be willing to pay more for a house with 500 years of remaining life in the foundation than they would for one with 30. In conclusion, the foundation of any structure is critical to its stability, safety, and longevity. The foundation's job is to distribute the weight of the structure evenly into the subsurface, resist forces like wind and earthquakes, and withstand the effects of biological decay and soil movement. A well-designed and executed foundation can last for decades, providing job stability for structural and geotechnical engineers, while also providing homeowners with peace of mind. Even though foundation work can be costly and disruptive, it is a necessary investment in the longevity and safety of any structure.